Jane Butel, chili, tequila, great Southwestern cuisine, and recipes, recipes, and recipes. It's subtitled, It's a Fruit, Not a Vegetable. This is episode 11 on What Has My Attention podcast. Published December 23rd, 2020, if you enjoy Southwest cooking and or tequila, and you've got a little time this holiday season, you've landed on the right episode. Some of the topics covered with Jane in this episode are prepare to make great chili, great guacamole, and there's great tequila, the healing properties of tequila, the perfect margarita, the origin of margaritas, and recipes, 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 the cooking school, and if you can't get it fresh, the best brands of chili Jane recommends, Jane's culinary tours, and to cut to the chase, head over to janebutelcooking.com. Did I mention tequila? A lot. Welcome, Jane, to the show.
Oh, well, I'm really glad to be here.
I know.
It's wonderful to be with someone that's been so much in New Mexico.
Yeah. Well, I spent most of my adult life in Santa Fe from, I was 32 years old, and anyway, I was there for like 24 years. So,
well, they say once sand gets in your sandals, you'll always be back.
Yeah, I know. We actually met from Virginia Rodriguez, I think, sent me an email because she had just been on a call.
Yes, I happen to have the good fortune to be with her on a breakout from a webinar last week.
What webinar was it?
It was from David Ricklin. He has a self-growth. Mm-hmm. It's a website, and he has quite a lot of following, and he does quite a few webinars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Virginia has a magazine here in Encinitas, Carlsbad, California area called Epic. So,
she wants me to contribute to it. She sent me an author's sort of a spec sheet on what they like and what they require, mm-hmm. and so I intend to follow through. Yeah.
So everybody out there listening is probably going, what's this episode all about? And we're going to be talking about chili because, yeah. So one thing I wanted to lead with is, basically what brought you to reach out to me? I mean, and why do you think Virginia actually recommended we have a conversation?
Well, I started talking about, I have a sort of a passion for chili health. I really think that if you eat, I like this little bit of research from the University of Philippines that states that if you eat at least a half a teaspoon of the hottest chili you can endure at least 2/3 of the time, your lifespan will be greatly enhanced and that you will not have the incidence of cancer or heart disease and life-threatening diseases are fundamentally out the window. I know not everyone agrees with this, but it certainly worked for me.
Oh, nice. You have a personal story around that?
Well, I've outlived both my parents, my dad by a lot. And my father always liked chili a lot. My mother was Swedish, and she'd eat it, but she wasn't so much into it, and mm-hmm. she did get cancer. Mm-hmm. Dad just had a cerebral hemorrhage, which was horrible, but
I'm sorry.
I don't think chili possibly would have helped that. But I guess I've always just really liked chili. Mm-hmm. I was very fond of my father, who just loved chilies, and it was just always a fun thing. We moved around a lot when I was real little. Dad was in the Navy, and then when we settled down and he inherited a farm in northeastern Kansas that he had personally grown up on, we grew chilies. Not a lot, but some, because the soil there is a little too rich. As I was in my corporate career, I tried to grow chilies in New York State and Kentucky, mm-hmm. and they'd get flourishing and set on a lot of fruit, and it is a fruit, not a vegetable, but they'd mildew, they wouldn't grow big, and mm-hmm. Chilies love New Mexico.
Yeah, what kind of environment and soil and stuff like that do chilies like?
They like a sandy soil mm-hmm. with limited rain. In fact, a real interesting statistic is that you can have up to 15 different heat units on one plant at any given moment. Chilies don't really stay real strict to their DNA. In other words, you could have this huge variation in heat units or the spiciness or the hotness of a chili, just at any one particular point in time. I've never seen this written or researched, but I'm positive it's true, that the amount of heat a chili bears by the time it becomes a ripe fruit or a pod, I think it's highly dependent on the amount of moisture that's on the roots and on the leaves at the time it turns into a fruit.
So what, are you saying less moisture or more moisture or some sort of cycle?
Well, when we used to grow, for a while, we had a little acreage on the Pecos River. That's how I named my spice company. And when we first started selling chilies in 1978, people wanted them mild. And chilies are habit forming. They're not addictive, and yet they're a first cousin of nicotiana, which is tobacco. But tobacco is addictive. And so, but the more a person eats chili, the more you want to eat chili and the hotter you desire it. So it has some of those habit forming aspects.
Yeah, that was my case. I think I told you on a previous conversation when I first moved to Santa Fe in 1985, I went to a restaurant and I had blue corn, green chili, chicken enchiladas.
I think that's a favorite.
Well, I'm sure it's a favorite, and it became my mission for a year on weekends to actually just try to find the best restaurant that had that. And I ended up in Espanola, and I'm trying to remember the name of the restaurant. I think it was called Molly's, is what I want to say. And it was family run. Nobody spoke English, and it was like a religious experience. It was wonderful. Yeah, it was really, really nice.
Yeah, they're so yummy. They're really, really good.
Yeah, they're really good.
And I think a lot of the restaurants and a lot of the people kind of short circuit the sauce. They just use canned or frozen chilies and thicken the sauce a bit with flour or cornstarch and call it good. Yeah. I like to build a sauce, sort of like you build a white sauce or a gravy, but build it with a lot of flavor.
So how do you build it? Let's talk about the building blocks of creating a great chili sauce.
It's like making gravy. You take some kind of shortening. People tease me about the fact I use lard, but lard's the healthiest of all solid shortenings. You can use lard, you can use butter. And there's kind of a real old-fashioned saying that if you want a thin sauce, use 1 tablespoon of shortening to 1 tablespoon of flour to 1 cup of liquid. And if you want a medium one, it's 2 to 2 to 1 cup of liquid. Or if you want a really thick sauce, like you're going to make a souffle, then it's 3 to 3 to 1. So I like to use a medium. So you take 2 tablespoons of, let's say more people will like butter than lard, so you take butter, and then to build some more flavor in it, I add about 2/3 of a cup of chopped onion, and then I add my 2 tablespoons of flour. So I cook the onion until it's kind of clear, then add the flour. Cook it so the flour kind of incorporates with the butter, but I don't worry about it browning. I don't want to burn the onion. And then to that, I add 1.5 cups, which makes it a little bit on the liquid side, of double rich chicken stock and minced garlic and a pinch of cumin. And that gives a really nice balance of flavor. And then you can add 4 to 6 green chilies that are parched, peeled, and again, coarsely just chop them widthwise, don't chop them lengthwise. And fold green chilies in just about 3 to 5 minutes before you're going to make enchiladas. And then only add the chicken at the very last second, because the chicken will have been poached or cooked. And if you add it too early in the process, the chicken will turn to like chicken thread.
Okay. Awesome. I'm going to tell a short story about my introduction to green chilies, which was I arrived, I want to say it was October 27, 1985 in Santa Fe, and it was a Sunday.
Wow.
And everything was closed down. That was the way it was then. I mean, a few gas stations were open, but nothing else. And I remember pulling into downtown near the plaza, and there was a Piggly Wiggly store there, and it was closed. But there was a guy out there in an old green, I think it was a green Ford pickup truck. And in the back of his truck were these gunny sack bags. And there was a roaster sitting outside with a propane tank on it. And
Oh, for roasting green chilies.
Yeah. So I drove in and parked alongside of him. He spoke no English. I spoke no Spanish. But I got to tell you, it was one of the best days of my life because people would drive up. Oh, yeah. People would drive up and buy a bag of green chilies, a gunny sack bag for like $25. And then they would
and he'd roast them.
And then they would take them home and spread it out on plastic garbage bags, I think well, at least that's what I learned to do later. And then just peel the chilies, stick them in baggies, and freeze them.
But see, I take a different point of view on that.
I was looking forward to this.
Yeah. Well, actually, I don't like to use those rotating drums. I like to parch them. I call it parching rather than roasting because by definition, roasting is when you cook something all the way through. Parching is when you just blister the outside. So I like really hot heat, like on a grill outside or under the broiler in the kitchen. And then as soon as they're nice and parched and fairly uniform brown blisters on them, then I immediately plunge them into something cold, like ice water or at least cold water, and that stops the cooking. So when you do them my way, the flesh of the green chili, say, maybe an eighth of an inch thick. When you do them the other way and you let them just kind of cool on their own, most of the moisture goes out, and chilies are like 92% water. So you have just like paper thin flesh. I mean, it's not nearly as thick, and it's chartreuse color instead of bright green. And vitamin C is air oxidizable vitamin. So you've lost a lot of the nutrition if you don't chill them. Oh,
that makes total sense. Well, I'll have to try that next time.
And then it's so much easier. You leave the skin on. Chilies that you freeze, I freeze them like strawberries. So once I've parched them, peeled them, chilled them, drain them a little bit, put them on cookie sheets and flash freeze them. And then I put the chilies with the peeling still on, the whole chilies in a bag, about 12 to the bag. And I obviously label them. And you know what? Even if it gets lost in your freezer for a couple of years, it'll still be good because the leaving the skin on is sort of like Mother Nature's natural protector. When you peel them, it makes them naked and then subject to air oxidation.
Got it. Great. Well, a lot of tips.
No. It's probably more than you wanted to know.
No, it's not. I'm actually sitting on your website right now, and for everybody out there, I want to let you know that, there's a course about Jane, but there's the blog, books, Pecos Valley Spice Company, the cooking school, online classes, featured recipes, and of course you can contact Jane. So
thank you, John.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about the books you've done and also the Pecos Valley Spice Company and the cooking school. Well, tell me about everything.
Oh, thank you. Well, I was corporate for 20 years, and then for matters of the heart, I left a really good corporate job to move back to Santa Fe, and the relationship didn't work out. So I decided rather than go back into corporate, I always wanted to write this book, and I majored in home economics and journalism. The book I'd started writing when I was a home economist and doing cooking classes with the local power company. The offers I got, I was way ahead of myself, and the offers I got were not from major publishers. Like I wanted, a big publisher.
Sure.
So when I decided, well, I'm free at this point, I'll dust off that book and enhance it. And I wrote the Tex-Mex cookbook. I didn't want it to be called that because here in New Mexico, Tex-Mex is almost like a dirty word.
Yep.
But the vice president of Crown Publishing, who wanted the book, had been a hippie out here, and he'd lived in the rubber tire village north of Albuquerque called Placitas. And he said, Jane, I just love that food. But he said, your title, which was blue corn and green chili, blah, blah, blah. He said, people don't like green and blue food. They're not going to understand it. They're not going to buy it. He said, we're going to call it the Tex-Mex book. And it was huge. It was a major bestseller and stayed in print from 1980 to 2012.
Oh, wow.
Which is pretty unheard of for a cookbook. And then just about a couple years ago, Turner Publishing from Nashville, I hadn't heard of them, but my agent had. Anyhow, I had 8 of my bestsellers republished plus a new one. So total, I've written 32 cookbooks, but that kind of counts the rewriting the re-edification of some of those. And I was living in Santa Fe and New York, so I went back to New York, was where I could get, I thought, more opportunity, but I missed Santa Fe. So that's how I started the cooking school. It gave me an opportunity or a reason to spend. I started the week-long full participation cooking schools, and I'd take over a B&B in Santa Fe, and we'd cook in the kitchen. So I did that for 10 years, and then finally decided to move back full-time to New Mexico. And the spice business I started at the time, we'd owned the Pecos River Ranch. So we called the spice company the Pecos River Spice. And then the investor I got said, Jane, you can't grow spices in a river, so we're going to change the river to a valley. So that's how the name evolved. And we got pretty big at one point, and I attracted some really bad partners. One of which was really bad. He ended up in prison. He really cheated me out of a lot. So I decided, this fast track and selling supermarkets, it's really a difficult business. So what I decided to do is just go online, and I'm still doing it. And
nice.
It's really heartening how people just love our chilies are all pure. When you buy pure ground chili commercially, even here, they put silicates in it, and they put diethylene oxides, which diethylene oxides preserves the color, but it's a declared carcinogen, and the silicates make it fluffy, so it's not lumpy. And I said, I have lumpy chili, which means it's always pure.
Yeah. So we were talking about this. I had mentioned before that I was really pleasantly surprised last year here in Trader Joe's in California to see that they had Hatch green chilies, in the freezer section.
Yeah, well, Hatch has done a wonderful job of marketing. They say only a small percentage of the green chili that's labeled Hatch is grown in Hatch, but that's how markets evolve. I can remember that little town was you just wink and you'd go drive through it.
Yep.
Well, they've really put chili on the map. They've done a great job.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember it. So also on your website, I know you have a section called featured recipes. So what are the top 3 recipes that people that are the most popular that you have that people just absolutely love, and why do they love them, do you think?
Probably the real super big one is Bola Red. And that's my favorite chili. And it's one that my grandfather actually kind of refined and developed. He was in charge of the Santa Fe Railroad. But Bola Red, it's really hard for me to answer that. Yeah,
I'm sure. I'm looking at this incredibly long list. Oh, my God.
Yeah. Well, I have that 10 favorite recipes. If you click on that, you're automatically a subscriber to the blog. But, of course, you can always unsubscribe. But in there, people always like my guacamole. I call it Perfect Guacamole, and I call my margaritas Perfect Margaritas.
What kind of tequila do you recommend? I have my favorites.
Well, I like Herradura, but if you get sticker shock, then I think Sauza is a really good, moderately priced, but always very good. It was originally started by a family from Herradura, the sherry growing portion of Spain. And so they aged their tequila in oak casks that were originally ones that were used to age sherry in. And so it has a more mellow
this is the Herradura
than does Jose Cuervo and some of the more commercial brands.
You're talking about Herradura, right?
No, I'm talking right there about Sauza, Sauza. It's the Spanish originated tequila. In fact, I can remember before tequila was so big in the little town of Tequila, it used to be that only liquor that was made from the blue agave plant had to be made in tequila. But many years ago, when tequila really broke out and got so popular, then the assembly in Mexico decided that they could get the NOM, the registration mark, if they had blue agave plant. But the blue agaves don't grow south of a meridian, somewhat south of Mexico City. And so down there, and it's an older style of tequila, it's called Mezcal. And Mezcal is still made down there with the blindfolded donkey and and it has a more smoky, kind of a more raw type taste because it's made in like cottage industry type batches, except for Monte Alban and a few other brands.
Yeah, I actually, when I was in college, in Portland, Oregon, I visited a friend of mine in Tucson, and we went to the top of, I think it was Mount Lemmon, and polished off a bottle of Mezcal.
It's a little rougher. It's not quite as
it is. Yeah. A little worm at the bottom of the bottle, kind of a thing.
That's the Monte Alban brand.
Yeah. God, you know so much. It's amazing. So what's...
Monte Alban is an old historic, used to be considered one of the top 10 treasures of the old world. Mm-hmm. And it's right overlooking Oaxaca. I still do, to this day, I still do culinary tours. It was interrupted this year because of the COVID, but Oaxaca's a mecca of really fabulous food, and I've enjoyed it since I was a child. And so we go down there, and we do go to a Mezcal factory. In fact, one of the things that's really pretty fascinating, there's a cluster of ancients that still live on the height of the top of the mountains, and they make Mezcal, and they can tell the percentage of liquor, percentage of alcohol, pardon me, by blowing through a hollow bamboo piece, and they can trace their lineage right straight back to Asia, to China.
Oh my gosh!
Which is really very interesting.
Yeah,
and it's kind of a huge history, but and they make different flavors, and you can get coconut Mezcal, you can get all kinds. You,
on our previous conversation, you had a story about Herradura. Do you want to repeat that one?
Oh, yeah. Well, my father always thought Herradura was the finest of all tequilas. Mm-hmm. And until somewhere in the 70s, Herradura was made by monks in an old hacienda. Mm. And they have out front, they call it the oldest and biggest fig tree in the world. But the tequila was made in an old copper. They still have it there for tourists to see. An old copper still, like they have on the hills in the Tennessee mountains, supposedly. Mm. And they have and it's like down by Oaxaca and further south, they have these big, deep trenches where they'd use a blindfolded donkey to stamp the roasted agave, which is the piña or the center part of an agave plant. It takes 10 years for one of those to develop, by the way. Mm-hmm. So they roast it, and they put them in this trench, and they let the donkey stomp them, and then they'd let it ferment, and that's how they made tequila. It was all hand done until in the mid-'70s, Jack Daniel's bought it, and then they really enhanced it. Now they use stainless steel fixturing and whatever, but it's a beautiful distillery to go through. It's really, really interesting and very beautiful with a lot of pink bougainvillea. But Jack Daniels then a few years back sold out to Brown Forman of Louisville. So Herradura is now going big time, and you can buy it almost anywhere in the world. Mm-hmm. And it's not sequestered just to old Mexico.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So are you hoping to get back to doing some tours in 2021,
I have a holdover group that we couldn't make it in 2020. And so I'm hoping I can take a maximum of 15. Mm-hmm. And I already have 7 that are waiting to go this next June 9 to 15. One other thing, I don't know whether you want me to tell this or not, but a friend of mine was doing a promotion for Herradura right after Herradura had gone public with Jack Daniels. Mm-hmm. And she said, "Hey, Jane, you're touring the Tex-Mex book. What if we gave you a stipend and you'd ask on all the television shows if they'd like to have a perfect margarita?" And I was almost 100% successful. People always like to try. Perfect margarita is when you have 3 parts of tequila, and it's a silver tequila, which has the highest alcohol content. It's the least least aged, I should have said. Mm-hmm. And 3 parts of fresh squeezed lime juice, 1 part of orange liqueur, and 3 parts of tequila. So it's pretty strong, but it's very good. Yeah,
well, that's interesting because I love tequila. I told you the other day with the Herradura.
Yeah, I do too.
With Herradura, there's another thing. I drink it neat with some lime slices on the side. And honestly, it's kind of sounds strange, but there's not a time when I have it like that I don't have some sort of religious experience. I don't know what it is, and I feel great the next morning.
Former life, if you believe in that sort of thing.
Yeah, I know. But, it's the only alcohol I can drink where I don't feel not great the next day. I always feel great the next day with her.
Well, I think there's something really logical to that. If people have stomach trouble or they're, just not too well, a lot of the homeopathic doctors prescribe aloe water or aloe juice. And there's a whole line of aloe everything.
Sure.
And the aloe is a first cousin to the agave. And the agave is what they use to roast and then ferment and make tequila out of. So it's something that's supposed to help your stomach and aid your health and well-being.
Well, I believe it. I totally believe it.
Yeah.
So, but you're doing... Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Nope. Ladies first.
Oh, I was going to say tequila, like margaritas and chili, I think they really do go together for health and sense of well-being. As I mentioned the other day, chilies are have the strongest and greatest ability to create internal happiness within your body because they're the greatest endorphin producer. Chocolate is the second. So if you have that, and then you have tequila, which also makes you happy.
Yeah.
I was going to tell a story about the origin. Have you heard the origin of the margarita?
No. Let's hear it. That'd be great.
Well, it started in San Miguel Allende, and there was this beautiful woman named Margaret. And it was early in the afternoon or, a little before cocktail time. And she just stopped in to get a drink or check in with the bartender or whatever in this hotel that was downtown San Miguel. And there was a man at the bar drinking shooters, which is what you're saying you like to do, the salt and the lime and tequila. And meanwhile, there was a Spanish guitarist playing beautiful music. And it just happened that Margaret had a full skirt on and it was very beautifully shaped and beautiful face. And she started kind of making, like flamenco movements to the guitar music. And this fascinated the man at the bar. And he started drinking his, when he was taking his shooters, he was watching Margaret so intensely that he started to miss his lips. So the bartender, not wanting to stop his business, decided he'd aid and abet him. So he put lime juice around the edge of the cocktail glass, crunched it in salt, put the tequila in the bottom of the glass, and that's supposedly the birth of the margarita, because her name was Margaret.
Yeah. No, I love it.
I don't know how the triple sec or the Contro got into it, but it became part of it.
So let me ask you too, do you have a perspective on actually how to pair tequila with chili with any other kind of alcohol or wine or anything else? I mean, there's...
one of the things that I have as I consider a really good accolade, I was invited to the Smithsonian to make my bowl of red. And I invited a local vintner here who's from the Champagne district of France, and they make beautiful champagne. I think champagne goes really well with chili. And so he supplied 12 cases of champagne, and the Smithsonian said they had the largest ever attendance at my presentation, and it was on chili and champagne.
Wow.
But I think chilies can go into any kind of wine or beer. There's so many textures and types of chilies, and there's so many ways to create chilies into various foods. And I always say chilies just help every cell of your body. They can help you have the waistline of your dreams, because if you eat quite a lot of chilies, you don't eat as much high calorie food. They help your complexion, aid your digestion, give you a great sense of humor. I don't know.
Yeah.
But,
we had mentioned the other
maybe I should be more specific, but I think chili definitely has a stronger flavor, so you want something that will kind of stand up to it.
We also mentioned the other day when we were talking about green chili having a lot of vitamin C in it. So typically New Mexicans who eat a lot of green chili don't have the common cold as much as other people.
No, we have a healthier and longer life expectancy. But the interesting thing, though, I think about green chilies is in September, October, when the chilies become riper and they start to become red on the vine or the plant. It's like the vitamin C diminishes and vitamin A becomes paramount. Isn't that interesting? And vitamin A is the sight vitamin for when there's shorter days. It's sort of like, You can even think there might be a creator that had something to do with that.
Tell me about the online classes you're doing. I'm sure people want to know about it.
Okay, well, the 40-session online class is almost like the Bible of chili. It tells you all the things about how chilies, how they've evolved, how they react in your body, all the different heat units and whatever. And then there's 30-some classes where we cook with green chilies first, and we cook with red chilies. But it is based on text. It's not a video. It lasts for a little over 2 months. But it's self-study, and of course I'm right there to communicate, and they communicate with each other, the people taking the class. Then the one that we just released this week, it was tamale rolling, and we're going to be releasing a lot more video types. And I have a great number of, I think all 30 sessions of my PBS series are on YouTube. And then one summer I put a lot of New Mexican and Chile type cooking classes on YouTube called Chilis and Chiles, spelled two different ways. Basically, the pod or the fruit is Chile, and the dish where you have meat or vegetables is Chili.
Well, I wondered about that. I wasn't going to ask you, but I'm glad you mentioned it because I got a little confused when I was writing stuff up. Is it E or I? Now I know.
Well, that's just how I started simplifying it. It makes sense to me.
I'm curious, Jane. I know there's a lot of people out there that probably have gotten real curious about green chili and stuff and chili in general. So generally speaking, in terms of mainstream, and I'm sure it's not the quality that you normally cook with, but what brands out there that people might be able to get a hold of to start playing around with this chili?
Well, I used to be a spokesperson for Ortega brand. Ortega is pretty widely distributed. It used to be Mountain Pass, was distributed pretty widely. Clemente Jacques, Jacque, is a brand out of Mexico that is very good. I'm not positive. I haven't tried to buy canned chilies. Mountain Pass and Ortega brand are probably the two more widely distributed brands, and you can really get some really good flavor with the canned green chilies. I think if you get used to the fresh, and I've honestly given cooking classes almost everywhere not everywhere in the world, but a lot of places from Africa to France and on. And you can almost always buy green chilies. They may not be exactly what you want, but almost everywhere you can buy the canned. Like I was really surprised in Provence, France. I was there just a few summers ago, and they wanted me to do classes or, cook for them. And even the little stores would have them. And but I think Asia took to chilies, of course, a lot more than Europeans did because of the Bering Strait aspect that the early settlers in the Americas were mostly of Asian descent west of the Mississippi and of Viking descent east of the Mississippi. So the chilies went back and forth. Chilies all emanated in the Americas. And supposedly the original chilies emanated or started sort of the Rio Grande where Mexico and the U.S. split and going all the way over to the Key West and the Caribbean, because there's a lot of tracing back to the various native peoples that were in the Caribbean or the Caribbean. They did a lot of work with chilies.
Wow.
So, and then they went to Africa.
Yeah. I've met some people that are from different parts of the world, and they talk about chili as well. So I'm kind of curious, is there anything, do you actually play with new recipes? Are you coming up with something new? Do you experiment a lot?
A fair amount. I'm a little dampened by my partner in a way. He's of Swiss German background, and he didn't have chilies until last 10, 12, 15 years to any great extent. I like to tell this story. Yes, I do experiment. I'm always experimenting. My latest book was simply Southwestern. My theory is that I think an awful lot of recipes that are developed have a lot of unnecessary ingredients that sometimes they start and they get the flavor torqued too far, too much acid, too much whatever. And so they just keep adding more ingredients to balance the flavor. My whole thing is the challenge, I think, is less is best to create pure, true flavors. And it makes it a simpler style of cooking. So I work with that quite a bit. Well, I find it really fascinating. Chilies, really took off in China and Asia. There's quite a bit of use of them, but they don't differentiate them like we do over here. But the interesting thing is I was fortunate enough to be with a group that was the first in that were not politicians and whatever after the communist takeover in China when they were first opening up China after Nixon. And I got deathly ill, as a matter of fact, because they just weren't ready for tourism. But what was fascinating was that they want to know what I'd like to see. And I said, I'd like to see your medical facilities. What were your birthing hospitals like? Well, they took me to one, and it was around the old Canton. And it was just a cement slab. But the interesting part was their apothecary, which this was still an operational unit, was the old, dusty, cobwebby bunches of chilies. And then they explained to me, the tour guide explained to me that chilies were not allowed to be consumed as food in mainland China until after the communist takeover. And that's why so much of Chinese food, the Cantonese style and whatever, is so bland. Police the Gobi Desert and the far northern parts of China. So that's where the Szechuan and the Hunan and the Mongolian, the really spicy Chinese food started. And it wasn't until after the takeover of China into the 80s and 90s that, the spicy Chinese dishes became, popular in the U.S. So I find that interesting.
Fascinating
that
stuff.
You had to get sick in China before the communist takeover in order to have chilies.
Yeah. I admit I don't understand Chinese culture much at all. I know it's
I haven't studied it well. I haven't either, but.
What are you looking most forward to in 2021 or 2022?
Well, I'm looking forward to sort of opening things up. We've been in such a sequestered, our governor has had us in lockdown quite a bit. Of course, it's paid off. We don't have it nearly as high of death rate, but I'm looking forward to just breaking out again.
Yeah.
Going back to Oaxaca, doing some more work with Mexico, teaching. I really enjoy teaching a lot, making more videos and traveling.
Nice.
I sort of feel like I'm getting almost rusty. I haven't been anywhere.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm feeling
Do you
kind
feel
of
the same way?
Oh, absolutely. Although as a podcaster and stuff, most of the time we're doing it pretty remote anyway. But I do have a home-based studio, but nobody's been in here since this whole thing started. So.
Wow.
Yeah, I kind of.
Well, I think that's really wonderful that you have your studio.
Yeah. Well, I have a studio and everything's done remote, and I'm pretty much perfected for myself and our clients, a way of just doing really high quality remote recording, because I just love the conversation, and the conversation with you is just like fantastic. I love it. It's really
thank
great.
you. Well, I really enjoy talking with you.
Yeah. No, this is great. Probably going to want to do it again at some point. I'm thinking,
okay.
Yeah. So do you ever do any live Zoom calls or any of that kind of stuff at all?
Oh, sure. I'd be glad to. I do them constantly.
Okay, good. And you use Zoom.
I must admit, I'm probably on Zoom 2 or 3 or 4 times a week. I was just yesterday, but I've never been the person that started it. I've always been, the recipient.
Yeah, the guest or something. All right. Well, in wrapping up, I want to actually let everybody know, great website, and it's JaneButelCooking.com, and that last name is spelled Butel, so it's JaneButelCooking.com. Anything else you want to end with?
Well, I'd just love to have you all visit my website. I'd love to have you subscribe to my blog. If you go to JaneButelCooking.com and click on 10 favorite recipes, you're automatically a subscriber.
Yep.
And if you like chilies at all, please give us a try. We have a special on this weekend, 25% off on the favorite chilies and tamale kits.
Nice.
And John, I really thank you. You're wonderful.
Welcome. Yeah, so are you. This is great.
And you enjoy your holiday season as best you can.
I will. Thank you very much. And
you're welcome.
I look forward to meeting you at some point. Like I said, my partner Stephanie's in Santa Fe. And, you're in Corrales, right? So.
Yeah, that's just south. It's not far at all.
No, it's not.
I'd be glad to drive up there. Maybe I'll get over to San Diego too.
Well, I mean, what's going to have to happen is I'm going to fly into Albuquerque and then I could just stop by on the way up to Santa Fe.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah, good. All right. Well, have a wonderful holiday, Jane. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. You're so welcome. You have a wonderful one too.
Okay. Thanks. Bye.